Classic British manners you don't see anymore. For much of history, Britain was renowned for its courtesy, charm, and the little rituals that made daily life feel ordered. From greeting strangers with a hat tip to writing letters of thanks, politeness shaped society in visible ways. Today, those once ordinary practices are fading, replaced by a faster, more casual culture. Yet the echoes of those classic British manners you don't see anymore still hold a certain magic. They remind us of an era when respect and grace were woven into everyday life. 1. The polite greeting. Hats, bows, and curtsies. There was once a time when greetings were ceremonies in themselves. A British gentleman would never pass another without lifting his hat. Whether a slight tilt of the bowler or a full doff of the cap, the gesture spoke of respect and civility. For women, a curtsy, sometimes just a graceful dip of the knees, was a traditional mark of respect, especially in upper-class and formal circles. These weren't merely aristocratic quirks. Across villages, market towns, and city streets, greetings carried ritual. You might see a farmer touching his flat cap to a passing neighbor, or children bowing slightly to elders on their walk home from school. Today, hats are rarely worn outside of fashion or formal events, and the gestures that went with them have faded. But when we look back at old films or photographs of Edwardian crowds tipping hats at a parade, we see the charm of a society built on classic British politeness. 2. Handwritten thank you notes and letters of courtesy. Before the world of text messages, emails, and emojis, gratitude was something you expressed with pen and paper. After receiving a gift, attending a dinner, or even staying briefly in someone's home, it was expected that you wrote a proper thank you letter. Stationery was chosen carefully. Some families had embossed letterheads or cream-colored writing paper saved for such occasions. Children were often drilled in this etiquette, their first awkward letters corrected by parents until they learned the rhythm of phrases like, "I am most grateful for your kind invitation." Letters of condolence were another vital ritual, written in calm, thoughtful language that conveyed respect in a time of grief. Even casual notes were imbued with an elegance rarely matched by today's hurried digital messages. This practice wasn't just about manners, it preserved the art of written English. A thank you note wasn't only a duty, it was a miniature performance of gratitude, a way of keeping relationships alive. Today, a quick cheers by text is enough, but those old letters remain a symbol of lost British traditions. 3. Standing up as a sign of respect. One of the most unmistakable traditional British customs was the act of standing when someone entered the room. In schools, children would rise the moment the teacher walked in. In homes, sons and daughters stood for grandparents. In public life, it was routine for men to stand when a lady entered or when an elder approached. The gesture was a quiet but powerful way of saying, "I see you, I respect you, and I acknowledge your presence." This wasn't confined to the wealthy or the formal. Working-class families upheld it as strongly as the aristocracy. In fact, it was often seen as a sign of good upbringing. Parents beamed with pride when their children stood politely for visitors. Today, outside of very formal occasions or old-fashioned schools, this manner is rare. Standing for elders has largely given way to casual greetings, but it remains one of the most evocative examples of classic British manners you don't see anymore. 4. The language of polite speech. If you listen to recordings from mid-20th century Britain, you'll notice the rich vocabulary of politeness. "I beg your pardon." "Would you be so kind?" "Much obliged." "Do excuse me." These weren't empty phrases. They were embedded in daily life. Even disagreements were wrapped in formality. On crowded trains, rather than a sharp "move," you might hear, "Awfully sorry, but might I squeeze past? Children were expected to reply with "yes, sir" and "no, ma'am" to elders. Even in shops, customers and shopkeepers exchanged polite forms of address. Today, the British are still famous for saying "sorry," but the elaborate turns of phrase have mostly vanished. Instead, shorter, more casual language dominates. Yet those longer phrases carried something special, a rhythm of respect and restraint that gave British speech its old-world elegance. The sir and ma'am formality still survives in schools and the military, but is now rare in everyday life. 5. Dining etiquette at home and abroad. Dining in Britain once came with an entire rule-book. You never placed elbows on the table, always passed food to the left, and certainly waited until the host had begun before lifting your fork. Even at ordinary weekday suppers, families observed small rituals, waiting for everyone to be served, saying thank you after each dish, and rising together once the meal was finished. In wealthier homes, dining etiquette reached almost theatrical levels. Silverware placed in precise order, napkins folded just so, and toasts delivered with carefully prepared speeches. At weddings or civic dinners, the traditional British custom of standing for long toasts was a mark of refinement. Over time, these rituals loosened. By the late 20th century, television dinners and fast-paced lifestyles eroded the strict observance of table manners. Still, echoes remain. A polite Brit will still eat with knife and fork in hand. Unlike Americans, who often switch hands when cutting and eating, Britons, like most Europeans, typically keep the fork in the left hand and the knife in the right. 6. Chivalry in public spaces. Another striking feature of Old British etiquette was public chivalry. A gentleman offered his seat to a lady, opened doors for others, and instinctively carried heavy parcels for anyone struggling. Escorting a woman across the street, offering an arm as protection from traffic, was sometimes encouraged in etiquette books and advice columns, even if not everyone practiced it daily. These customs weren't about superiority, but about courtesy. They signaled awareness of others, a belief that manners were the oil that kept society moving smoothly. Of course, Britain has modernized, and with it, the nature of courtesy has changed. Today, equality has reshaped these gestures, but the nostalgia of those little acts of protection and kindness still captures the imagination. 7. Silence and restraint in public. There was a time when a train carriage in Britain was noticeably quieter than it is today. Loud voices in restaurants or on buses were frowned upon, seen as signs of poor breeding. People prided themselves on keeping themselves to themselves, not disturbing others with chatter or noise. Eating in the street was another taboo. Sandwiches, pies, or even fruit were meant to be eaten at a table. Walking and eating was considered ill-mannered. This quiet restraint created an atmosphere that foreigners often remarked on. Britain felt calm, orderly, and dignified. Today, public spaces are far louder, with phone calls, music, and takeaway cups everywhere. Yet the memory of hushed train journeys and careful restraint remains one of the strongest symbols of classic British manners you don't see anymore. 8. Titles, introductions, and formalities. Finally, we come to the lost world of titles and formal introductions. Until recently, most Britons addressed even acquaintances by title. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Jones, Miss Brown. Using a first name immediately was seen as overfamiliar. Children were certainly never allowed to address adults by first names unless invited. Introductions also carried ritual. In formal receiving lines at weddings or town events, every guest would be introduced in turn, bowing or shaking hands with the host. These moments gave structure to social life and ensured no one was overlooked. Now, first-name culture has become the norm, and receiving lines are rare. But looking back, Those rituals gave gatherings a special dignity. They reinforced the idea that every meeting, no matter how small, deserved recognition and courtesy. The world has moved on, but the spirit of classic British manners you don't see anymore still lingers. These lost British traditions, from bowing and letter writing to formal dining rituals, once gave daily life elegance and order. Though society has grown more casual, the essence of classic British politeness remains timeless, reminding us that respect never truly goes out of style. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.